welcome to this Chalktalk presented by Garage 61 and Sim Racer Academy, Speed Secret Sim Racer Academy. This is going to be fun. We did one earlier today that was aimed sort of more at the European time zone, and now this is our second one, guys. Ruben, Balázs, we get to do this again, and I have to give a big, huge thank you to Ruben, founder of Garage 61, and Balázs Remenyik, my chief instructor, or the chief instructor at Speed Secret Sim Racer Academy. It's 2:30 in the morning for you, those guys. So talk about commitment, right? Great. So yes, this session will be recorded. We haven't, to be honest, we haven't exactly figured out exactly where we're going to post it or upload it or whatever, but it will be recorded. And so, yeah, if you're on a witness protection program, you probably shouldn't be on here. You should be hiding somewhere. So, okay, so here's what we're going to do. This is a Chalktalk, a Q&A session. Think about it as this is kind of like Balázs and Ruben and you are sitting in a pub and we're just having a conversation about sim racing. And this is very much focused on driving. We're not gonna get into, like, if you've got questions, technical questions around sim equipment or, super hyper detailed tech questions about Garage 61, you can ask questions about Garage 61 because Ruben's here. But if it's like super technical and detailed kind of stuff, we're going to say, hey, contact us afterwards. But, for now, we're going to focus this on helping you be an even better sim racer. I'm Ross Bentley. I've been involved with motorsport my entire life. And I was saying earlier, I started racing before simulators had ever been invented. So I feel like, wow, I am old, yes. But I started using simulators when probably it was around 2003, I think, when I got my first sim. And I started using it, but I use it strictly for coaching. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to put into, ongoing, consistent, regular racing. So I just kind of use it for a little bit of practice for myself, and then for coaching other drivers. But I've driven Indy cars and sports cars and all sorts of different things. But in one of the things I started coaching drivers 30 something years ago. And one of the things I noticed when I went from coaching real world drivers to sim racers is the differences in the way they practice. In real life, every lap costs a lot of money, like hundreds or thousands of dollars per lap. In the sim, man, you can just pound out laps over and over and over again. So the difference here is, in real life, my job as a coach is to help drivers learn more in less time. And when I started seeing the way some sim racers practiced, I went, that's not the most efficient way, because typically they just practice by doing more laps. And as you know, if you practice the wrong things, you only get good at or better at doing the wrong things. So that was the whole idea behind starting the Sim Racer Academy, was to help provide some guidance in terms of how to practice and how to get better in less time. So that's my background. Balázs joined Sim Racer Academy last year as the chief instructor, and his background and experience has just been incredible for helping. Balázs, do you want to give a little of that background and history in your case?
Yeah, hello everyone. Good to be here. As you said, Ross, if it's night talking at the pub, it's good that we are still talking at 2:30 a.m. It's been a good night. So I've been sim racing for about or a little bit over 15 years. So I've been around a while, and I've been racing in some of the biggest competitions, luckily in sim racing, which has been a blast to be able to take part in these events. And ever since last year. Well, now more than a year, I've been the official simulator driver for the Maserati Formula E team, and that is the role I still continue next to doing esports races. And apart from that, I've been doing coaching on simulators since 2020. I've had more than 1,000 sessions since then, which I've been really enjoying. And earlier last year, I think around February, we linked up with Ross to talk about what is possible together. And we found that we have some really common goals and the way we see how coaching can be done. So we've been working together for over half a year, 3/4 of a year now. So it's been a blast, and we are hoping to bring new content and new practice drills wherever we can.
Yeah, it's been fun taking my experience in sort of real world racing and Balázs's huge experience in sim racing, and we each have a little bit of the others, but merging those two. So that's been really fun. And Ruben, first of all, thank you, because you're the instigator here. You got us doing this thing. So first of all, thank you for creating Garage 61. I think everybody would agree. And thank you for participating in this as well. So, Ruben?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I'm the one making Garage 61, which I don't think needs much introduction. It's a bit of a fun story, because I started doing this like 5 years ago as a way to just make sim racing and the whole thing around it a bit less painful. And like in the Will Ferrell movie, like this escalated quickly. So now here we are with like 86,000 friends and me being up at 2:30 in the morning talking about sim racing, which I absolutely love. So thanks you guys for wanting to share some of your expertise. The previous session we had was super interesting, so I hope we get some good questions as well today.
And the way this is going to work is we're going to ask you to type in your questions in the chat area. You'll see over to the right of your screen, it says chat, and it also says Q&A only. You would think that we'd ask you to put it in the Q&A only, but we're only going to monitor the chat section. So do not put it into the Q&A only area. As usual, I have my lovely assistant, Robin, monitoring our questions and making sure that we don't skip them. One of the things that we'll ask is, put your question in, but if you see like a ton of questions, just wait a little bit. Wait, and then we'll kind of catch up, and then you can put in your question after that. I will say that we're going to aim for somewhere in the 60 to 90 minute range, but we will wrap it up at 90 minutes. So, last time we got through every single question, I think, and so we're gonna do the exact same thing again. Do we have any questions to start? We have our first question, and then just as we go along, again, just type in your question in that chat area, and we will start answering your questions again, just like we're sitting around in a pub. So, Brian asked, on corner entry, mid corner, as you trail brake into the corner, how do you know / feel that you are on the limit? Oh, that's a well. Balázs, do you want to go first?
Right. Yeah. So that's not an easy question to start with. Yeah, definitely something that needs, I think, experience for sure. Knowing or having an expectation what the car will do. I think it's about understanding how the car and the slip angle is working in the car at that point, because what the limit is when trail braking, I assume that what you're meaning there, Brian, is if you would step a little bit over with the trail braking, you would spin out the rear. So that's what you would expect, and that's the limit you are looking for. I think you need, first of all, experience with the car and the tires there. And the other part is understanding how the slip angle of the car works. You cannot really push too much over. Maybe Ross has a different approach to this question.
So when you enter a corner, and by the way, corner entry that's where all the magic really happens. When I look at drivers of every different type, every different level of real world sim racing, whatever, every part of it, karting, whatever, most drivers are pretty close in where they brake. Most drivers, the way they accelerate out of the corner, are pretty close. Most drivers drive a line that's really close to each other. Where the difference is how much speed they carry from the turn-in point to about the apex, the middle of the corner. And that's where the magic, if there is any magic, which there isn't, but that's where the real trick or the key the key to speed is in that section of the corner. And the car should be doing something there. If you come into the corner and you turn into the corner and the car does almost exactly everything that you want it to do, you're probably not going fast enough. The car there should be some slip somewhere. So you can feel it in the steering. If you turn and, you turn the wheel a little bit more and the car just goes there, well, you're not quite at the limit. But if you turn it and there's like a little bit of slip, that's telling you you're at that point. Now, if you turn it and you turn it more and the thing just slides and understeers more, then you've gone way beyond that limit. But if you turn it and there's just a little bit, you feel a little bit of slip in the front end, then you're very much in that range of around the limit there. Now, if you trail brake, here's the weird thing about trail braking, and just to define, because I've had people go, oh, trail braking is when you brake all the way to the apex. Yes, that would be trail braking, but if you brake that far past the turn-in point, you are trail braking just for that little bit. So trail braking is any amount of brake that you have on as you turn into the corner, just to be clear on that. Now, the thing is about trail braking is, think about when you brake, you're putting more load on those front tires. And when you turn into the corner, that can make the rear come around because you've got more weight on the front tires and the rears are lighter. So now the car rotates, and as Balázs says, the car could actually spin. So you could have too much. But here's the thing. You could also have the exact opposite. You can brake so much that you overload those front tires, and the front tires say, hey, we can't brake and turn at the same time. So you can actually cause understeer with too much trail braking. So it's one of those, well, that's why we do this, because it's not easy. You can cause understeer by not trail braking enough. You can cause understeer by trail braking too much. You can cause the rear to come around by trail braking too much, but you can also cause the car to understeer. So the point is that what you want to do, though, is you want to feel something as you turn into the corner. And if the car should either understeer a little bit or oversteer a little bit. I always think that one of our jobs as race drivers, and I don't care real world or a sim, part of your job is to find the weakness in the car. Find the weakness in the car. If the car doesn't have a weakness, you're probably not going fast enough. So maybe, how do you feel that you're at the limit? When you notice that there's a weakness in the car, and that weakness doesn't have to be big, but it's either got to be a little bit of understeer, a little bit of oversteer, or you're just lacking that overall grip going through the corner and the car just slides. Okay. So that's how you tell you're nearer at the limit. Next up, Robin, you got some more? Sorry, we're just getting caught up here or started here. So Flavio asked, novice question, is there a recommended approach to learn the ropes? There is so much information to absorb, which is awesome. A sort of roadmap from beginner to mastery would be great, specifically asking for sim racing learning. Well, the first thing I'm going to say to that, Flavio, is often I get asked questions around, what is it that Max Verstappen or, Scott Dixon, Alex Palou in Indy cars, or Colin Brown or Philippe Albuquerque or whatever in sports cars, what is it that they do? Or in NASCAR, William Byron, you name the guys. What is it that they do that's so trick that makes them special? And I've said this so many times. Some of you may have heard me say this before. The trick stuff is just doing the basics better than everybody else. So while there is, there are steps that you're going to learn as you're going through, just focus on, at the end of the day, there's 3 things that we do with the car. We brake, we turn, and we accelerate. Now, how you do them, that initial application of the brake pedal, how you're releasing the brake pedal, how you turn the wheel, is it quick? Is it turning in like this? How you feed in the throttle, is it, boom, or is it squeezing on? Is it waiting too long or getting on too early? Those are just, in a way, those are the basics. So I'm going to say that's the first thing, is don't get caught up in the ropes. Don't get caught up in the, I got to find some trick new thing that everybody's doing. No, just get really good at braking, turning the wheel, and accelerating. I know that sounds really simple, but that's what we do. Obviously, what we do with those 3 things, the braking, cornering, and accelerating, we can't do well if we're not using our vision properly. So getting to the point where you're practicing looking far ahead, coming back, looking for references, looking far ahead, those kinds of things are all part of it. So I would say, typically what somebody first learns is the line around the track. And that's a good place to start. But if you just follow the line that somebody else has taught, I'm going to say you're only going to go so far. One of the things that you want to do is, when you're working on the line around the track, is thinking about why is that line? Why is everybody driving that line through the corner? Understanding that part of it, and understanding, well, if I turn in a little earlier, this is what the car does. If I turn in a little bit later, this is what the car does. If I, don't unwind the wheel, or I unwind or straighten the wheel even sooner, what happens with the car? So understanding the why behind things, in terms of especially the line, is really important. So start there, work on using all the track, and then, working on getting back to power a little sooner, and then working on the speed that you're carrying through the corner, working on your braking, sort of compressing your brake zone, and then starting to shift the brake zone in. I'm kind of going through this quick, I'm sorry, but those kinds of things, and then taking all of that and smoothing it all out. Because in the beginning, most people tend to be pretty abrupt with those controls and things. So then thinking about, how can I smooth all that out as much as possible, and kind of blend the braking with cornering with steering. So that, I know, threw a bunch of at you. Balázs, do you want to add anything there, or?
Yeah, just a really quick one, because you basically said everything perfectly. What I would add is also understand at least a little bit about the dynamics of the race car, and try to understand what you are doing, why you need to do that. So now Ross mentioned in the previous question about the tread braking, how you are putting more weight to the front with that. Why is that good for you? Because once you start practicing that will also start to click that, okay, you need to do this because this will help you in this scenario. So I think that's it's really helpful at the beginner level already to be able to progress later.
Yeah, I think there's also and I think it's one of your sayings actually, was like drive the car, not the track.
Yeah.
And like if you just follow the line, you're not gonna find the limit. So, and the other thing I like that you said, like we do it because it's not easy. Well, there's a saying in software engineering in particular, like we don't do it because it's easy. We do it because we thought it was easy.
Yeah.
And it's the reason why motorsport and sim racing sticks for me, is like it stays hard. You can keep on improving.
Ruben, I have a T-shirt that says that on it. So the
There you go.
Yeah. I love that saying. So, Josh asked the question: what would be some good advice? What would be some good advice on car placement when you're into a turn? And what do people mean when they say to get all your steering done at or before the apex? I'm going to throw this at Balázs here in a second, but I'm going to tell you I'm going to tell you something here that sometimes frustrates me, is that there are people that will go, oh, you should always be on the throttle at the apex. You should always be here. You should always be finished your steering before the apex of the corner. You should always, if somebody uses the word always, run away and hide. Now, okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit here, but there are so many variables. One of my favorite sayings is it depends. There are so many it depends situations that so when you say what do people mean when they say to get all your steering done at or before the apex? Let me use my yellow car here. Let's say that the apex of the corner is right there. If you come into the corner and you turn in early, let me just make sure I've got this centered here for you. So if you come in and you turn in early and you get to here, and now you've got to turn the wheel a lot to make it through the rest of the corner, you're in a corner like this, you've turned in too early and you haven't got enough of your steering done earlier. What they're saying is you want to get most of your steering done back here, the tightest part of the corner, so that from the apex on out, you are unwinding the steering wheel as you come out of the corner. So that's what they mean by that. What would be some good advice in terms of car placement when you're into the turn? Have the car in the right place. How's that? And I'll just go back and then I'll hand it over to Balázs here. To what Ruben said is, one of the things that I stress all the time is drive the car, not the track. If you get hyper focused on driving this perfect ideal line through a corner, you're going to be so focused on the line that you're probably not driving the car near or at the limits. If you drive the car at the limit, 9 times out of 10, your car is going to tell you where the car should be placed. Because if you've got the car on the limit and you're coming in here and you're at the limit, like the car is on the ragged edge of grip, and then you try to turn it to get the car to go around, you're going to go, oh, well, that's not the right line, because the car won't go there when you're turning and asking more of the car. So, also think about driving the car to what feels like the limit that we talked about earlier. Balázs, do you want to jump in there on that?
Yeah,
do you remember what the question was?
Yeah. Okay. For car placement, I would just also say that when you're entering the corner, first we always say use all the track available, which is great, but we also need to understand why. Opening up the corner, what you're looking for always is the widest radius entering the corner always. That's a pretty simple reason, because on a wider radius you can go faster. And after that, in the specific scenario of the hairpin, of course, the widest radius would be just going around the outside. But Ross said really great in the previous session, actually, that racing is a compromise. and we are looking for the compromised fastest time and probably the best exit as well in the scenario of the hairpin. So of course we need to get to the inside of the corner, and as you said, Ross, get the steering done, most of it until then, and then the steering should be opening up from the apex and letting the car flow all the way to the, well, in that scenario, to the exit. Well, assume probably an exit curb or just the limit of the track, and that's something that that is actually not always self-explanatory, because I've done a lot of sessions where drivers would go there because they decided to steer the car there, but they were not on the limit, and that happens very often, especially with new drivers. That means you are at some point of the corner, you are not at the limit. That could be the entry, mid corner, or just the exit. But that's something that happens really often. That you take the car there, but you're not on the limit. If you are on the limit, the car will also naturally want to go there.
Yeah, if you find yourself somewhere at the apex here, and you just you come out of there and you go, okay, I'm going to unwind the steering and drive the car out here because I know that's what the right line is. But you're not driving the car at the limit. You're just steering the car out there. If you get to here and you squeeze back on the gas, on the throttle, and the car is kind of forced out here, then you're driving the car closer to the limit. So, yeah, the line is important. I'm not saying the line is not important, but it's not just the only thing. Driving the car at its limits. And, we talked about that from the very beginning here of how do you sense that? Yearly asked, how do you make sim racing training also productive for in real life tracks as well? For example, are there eye training or narration exercises that help both? I noticed, Ross, in a lot of your track footage, you're narrating while racing. So the first thing is, I'm doing a master class on driving in the rain. So I've put my a video that I created of me racing in the rain a few years ago, and what I did was I took the footage of this video and then I played it again and I talked over it. So I recorded what was going on in my head. And one of the things that I do, and a lot of drivers do, I'm not saying everybody does, but a lot of drivers do, is you kind of have little cues. And, like one of the things is, like, a lot of corners, to me, corners have themes. There are corners that are, a corner where you're maybe going to attack and then focus on exit. There are other corners that are more flowing. They're more momentum corners. So certain corners, as I approach them, I do, it's not necessarily talking out loud, but in my head, as I approach a corner, I go momentum, flow speed, attack, exit speed, like certain little cue words or phrases that get me into the right mindset for that particular corner. So you can do that in the sim, you can do it in real life. The more you do it on the sim, the better you're going to be in real life with it. So that's one thing. Certainly eye training stuff and vision training of looking far ahead. And, I've done a bunch of training and programs around training vision. I can't get super in depth here, but your eyes need to be glancing way ahead and then sort of coming back to the main references and glancing right ahead and coming back to the main references and glancing ahead. And your eyes should be kind of doing this scanning thing all the time. If people will say, look far ahead, but if you're just driving and you're looking the same distance kind of thing all the way around, your eyes are static. You need your eyes to be looking like almost as far as you can physically see, and then back a little bit towards the next key references, and then going ahead again. So if you practice that on the sim, it's going to help you in real life as well. Okay, we're getting a bunch of questions here, so I'm going to move on to here. So Flavio asked, what should I look for when searching for the limit? What are the visual or other sense signals when the sim does not provide that butt feel when the car does something? Balázs, do you want to take this?
Well, yeah, so obviously there is lack of G-force in a simulator. Well, unless you're running a multi-million-dollar one, there is a lack of forces there. But that's usually not, let's say, a bad thing for the sim, because that's when humans lose a sense, that means that they strengthen another one. So that means that you need to rely on the other ones. For example, something that is most common in the sim, and it's not as much used in real life, is the sound. The sound cues are vital in the sim, and for example, a lot of drivers do is they just turn down the engine noise a bit and turn up the tire noises to be able to hear that more. So that's something you can do also if you are a little bit lost on sensing the grip or the slip of the tire. That's something you can do. I think that's what I would say for sensing that is use the other senses rather than focus on what you lost.
And one of the tools that I use when I'm coaching drivers in real life in sim racing, and it's something that's in our library in the Sim Racer Academy, is the idea of doing what I call sensory input sessions. As Balázs mentioned, as we're driving, how do we sense where the car should be? How do we sense how close it is to the limit? We use our senses, and primarily, I mean, certainly we use vision as number one in terms of, first of all, vision is what gets us around the track. If we were blind, we wouldn't get very far. But it's our kinesthetic, that feel, that motion, proprioception, everything that we feel in our body is critical. And auditory is super important as well. I got to say, one of the reasons that for years and to this day, if a driver hasn't spent a lot of time karting, they're not going to be as good. And one of the things that you rely on in a kart is listening. You really listen to the sound of the engine and the sound of the tires and the air and everything passing you, all of that kind of stuff. Well, that same thing happens in a real car as well. So when you take a practice session and all you do is you focus on, I'm just going to soak up more visual information. And then you do a practice session where all you're going to do is focus on everything you can feel. And yes, sims tend to have less feel, but there is something there. The feedback through the wheel, the feedback through the pedals, that kind of stuff. There is something there. And some people go, yeah, but I don't feel anything. Well, practice, pay more attention, try to be more sensitive to it. And then do a session where all you do is focus on everything you can hear. And you're going to be dialing up your sensitivity to what your senses are telling you. And therefore, you're going to get better at sensing the limits. I don't know if that's the name is Rafe or, but Rafe asked, this one's for you, Balázs, and Ruben, you can chime in here as well because you've seen some data from this, but here's the big one. What differentiates the aliens from the rest of us?
I'm not an alien, so I'm going to let Balázs answer this one.
So, yeah, there's no magic formula or anything. If anyone is looking for that, it's really just as with every sport or every field in the world, dedication, practice, and understanding every detail about driving to the maximum or to the best to be able to maximize the performance of the car as well. I think that's how I can describe it.
I would add one that you guys mentioned in the previous session is focus. And like Ross said, like a football team doesn't go to the pitch and play all the time to practice. They put drills in and they work on their deficiencies.
Yeah, yeah. So as you guys were talking, I'm like, okay, that's no different than Alex Palou in an Indy car, or Colin Brown in a sports car, or Max Verstappen in a Formula One car. It's I'm going to say, if there was one thing, and there isn't, but closest to the one thing is it's how they practice. And it's not necessarily just more practice, but it's how they practice. The more specific, the more deliberate the practice is, the better they're gonna improve and learn in a shorter period of time. Again, going back to what I said in the beginning, my job as a coach is to help drivers learn more in less time. And if you kind of think about how you're practicing and you have some practice drills, that's going to make a difference. Speaking of practice drills, Luke asks, can you recommend any drills to help induce under and oversteer? Go, Balázs.
Well, I would say braking drills are pretty good. For example, on iRacing, you have the centripetal circuit, which is a really great tool for practicing actually stuff like this as well. There you can also try to induce understeer with steering, under and oversteer with steering, and just throttle modulation as well. Actually, braking is not even needed sometimes. So you can, just trying to hold that constant radius circle. You can do a lot with that. Doing a small lift sometimes can create the rotation you want. Adding more throttle, you can experiment how that creates understeer. I would say use that circuit or that, practice circuit, and try to get the car to understeer there, and also to get it to oversteer. All with throttle and brake and steering as well.
And one of the words that Balázs just used here was experiment. A good friend of mine, he has a saying that says, you learn more from experimentation than you do from experience. And, the example of somebody that's done the exact same thing for 30 years is not going to be as good as somebody who has experimented and tried different things for 3 years, because you learn more from trying different things. So, one of the things that I see a lot of sim racers do when they're practicing is they just go out and they just like, I'm going to turn that, I got to focus on turning faster lap. Well, okay, you're learning a little bit, but sometimes get out of your comfort zone, try different things, like try braking a lot later, try braking earlier, try braking lighter, try coming off the brakes a little sooner, try coming off a little later, try slowly coming off, try quickly coming off, try turning the wheel quicker, try turning it slowly, try going back to power, like the instant you're off the brakes, go to power. Other times, come off the brakes and then go to power. Try different things like that, and make your practice sessions times to experiment, to try things, and you will learn more. And, specifically in terms of you want to like pop your foot off the brake pedal as you come into the corner and turn the wheel and see how much understeer you get. Then come in there and just like keep your foot on the brakes, turn in with the car loaded up in the front end until the car starts to come around, and try to get the car to oversteer like that. Like overdo it, and then you can dial it back from there.
I like the realization that there is no car that is only understeer or only oversteer. Depending on how you manhandle it, you can make every car, every setup be either oversteer or understeer at the same time.
Yeah, actually, it's well, I was going to say it's amazing, and it's not amazing. It's actually pretty common where you can, because I do a lot of coaching in sports car racing, endurance racing, where you have multiple drivers, and the number of times a driver gets out of the car and goes, it's understeering, and the other driver gets out and goes, car's oversteering. Well, the car can't do both of those things unless the drivers are making it do those things. So Ruben, here's a question for you from Bart. Is there a telltale area of Garage 61 that can point to not trail braking correctly?
Oof. I should really ask like the simulator expert instead, but I'm not sure if you can pull it out of the telemetry right now. Probably you can see it in the speed traces when you go when you compare a person who actually does proper trail bracing and carries more speed into the corner than you do. There is also a thing called the GG chart, which we don't have yet. We will at some point, which can clearly show you which parts of the corner you're not maximizing grip. But right now, I would say like look at the speed in the corner. The guy who pulls more speed through is probably doing something better, and that's a very telltale sign.
I would approach it in a more simple way, and it's the delta time. Just look for the delta time where you're losing time compared to the others, because as they say, at the end of the day, the stopwatch tells the truth.
Yeah, we probably tell the same thing though, because the delta time and the speed difference
it would create the same effect. So. But I would just look for the data time, and if you notice that the data is increasing on every corner entry, then that's probably to do with your trail braking.
So just and not going to go super deep into this, but if you're looking at a speed trace on data, and you're accelerating down a straightaway, and you get to a corner, and you start to slow, and the speed comes down. If the speed comes down like this, and then starts to pick up again like that, I look at that and I go, there's not a lot of trail braking there. But if you come to the next corner and you start to slow down and it goes like this we call the hockey stick, where the speed trace goes down and then takes a little bit of a dip like that at an angle. That's trail braking in the speed trace. So if you're looking at, and by the way, you don't necessarily want to trail brake for every single corner. Now, if you're approaching a hairpin corner like this, you should see some trail braking there. If you're approaching a faster corner, a more flowing corner, you actually want to be off the brakes a little sooner, so you probably won't have any trail braking. So don't just go, oh, I got to trail brake in every single corner. Not necessarily. But just the simple thing of to look at a speed trace. If the speed trace comes down and it's pretty consistent, oops, sorry. Here I'm gonna like that. That's not a lot of trail braking. But the fact that that comes down like this and then takes a little angle like that and then takes off, that's trail braking there. So you can look at your speed trace, and you can tell how much trail braking you're doing in some corners. Todd asked, when practicing, there is a point where I plateau and finding the additional time gets difficult. What are some strategies should I take to go find the extra tenth? I think I've had this question before, haven't we, Balázs?
Yeah, we did just in the previous one a very similar question. I think there's we approached it actually two ways as well. Finding the last tenth is where you want to go, in the real tiny details of data comparison. That's where you want to, instead of just looking for the the major mistakes of braking early, not braking enough, or late on the throttle, you want to look for smaller details. You might just see a very tiny difference in let's say the braking or the steering, but that's you can try to replicate that. Maybe it works, maybe it not, but that's not how you find the tenth, the last extra tenth. What you need there is understand why that's working. You need to really think about why the car is doing that, what's happening there, and how you can improve if you adapt that. That's one way to look at it. And the other way, if you're really on a plateau and just can't really find time, even after you looked at data, drive something else. That was our other advice. Drive something else. If you're in a really fast car, fast prototype, F1 car, something, go drive something slow. Drive the MX-5, drive GT3, whatever, because it might be something that you are not doing best with the braking or something else on your driving, and you can, with you driving a slower car, you have more time to experiment with that. You have more time to think about what you are doing, and that's a good way to doing that. And Ross had a good example of actually doing the opposite. If you want to share that again.
Yeah, sometimes if you're driving a slow car, let's say you're racing a MX-5, slow but one of the best. If you sometimes go and drive a faster car, because it forces you to speed things up, and you're like trying to catch up, and finally you start to get comfortable with that, and then you go back into the MX-5 and you're going, oh, I have all the time in the world to make the car do what I want it to do. So sometimes just switching to a faster car or a slower car, I think it's a really good way of doing it. The other thing I'll say, Todd, is sometimes the best thing you can do is simply take a break. If you're out there just pounding laps, and I'm not saying that you're doing that, but if you're just pounding lap after lap after lap after lap, sometimes just stop, relax. As Balázs mentioned, sometimes just relax and kind of go, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I not doing something else? Like, sit back and kind of think things through a little bit. And this is one of the hardest things for people that do this, our sport, is don't try. Stop trying. Ruben, you mentioned earlier today, sometimes you turn your best laps when you're not trying to go fast, right?
Yeah, especially for a lesser talent than me. When I stop thinking, it goes better. No, but when you slow down and just focus on consistency, that's generally when I find time.
And actually, I'm going to tell a quick story as it relates to what Balázs was talking about if you're driving a car that's reasonably fast or fast, driving a slower car. Some of you may have noticed that just prior to the Las Vegas Grand Prix, Max Verstappen drove the Acura GTP car, and Colin Brown, who I started coaching when he was 12, is the factory Acura driver, GTP driver. He was there, and at the end of the day, I texted Colin. I said, "So, how's your student doing?" And he's like, Max was so much fun to spend some time with. And he said one of the things that Max told him was the reason why he has in real life GT3 cars. He says sometimes he goes out and just drives a GT3 car because he can work on his braking and his brake release, because when it happens in the Formula One car, it happens so fast that it's hard for him to practice it. So he practices that in a slower car, so then when he's in a Formula One car, it's more natural for him. So I think that's interesting that Max Verstappen will take the advice that Balázs mentioned earlier on, or just a few minutes ago, in real life. And obviously he does probably practices it a little bit on the sim as well. Julian asked, I have been sim racing for some time. I have learned to be consistent, but I cannot gain speed. What is the best approach to make a self-assessment and identify my weak spots, and thus focus on them and get better? Balázs, I think you talked about this earlier today, but do you want to take that one first?
I'd say looking at the data is the best way.
Yeah.
Just looking for a reference. It's a great tool that Garage 61 has openly available labs to compare with. That's really invaluable. I think sometimes we don't even realize how good that is, because on a real racetrack that might not be available to compare with someone, and that's the data is always honest. You can't really just look at it in a way that it doesn't tell the truth. If you were just to look at video, or just try to self-assess by thinking back your last race, it might not work. But the data always tells you the truth, and with that, you can't really go wrong. Finding the major areas that you're missing, I would say, go by setting a priority list, or just once you have identified all the issues that you might have, set them in a priority and try to work on whatever you think is the most important, and then just go based on that through the list. And for that, there's also what usually Ross says is that don't try to do too much at first, because then you will end up maybe for a while doing more harm than good.
And I would say, when you look at data and you compare your data to somebody else, to me, Balázs just mentioned data doesn't lie, but data doesn't tell you everything. And sometimes the way I look at data is it helps me ask better questions. So, one of the things here, like as a coach, I ask a ton of questions. I do a lot of asking questions and do less of telling the driver what to do. You can do the same thing. Self-coaching is about asking questions. So, if you see that your data trace is different than somebody else's, just ask yourself why. What is it that they could be doing that is different than mine? You may be faster in some places and slower in other places. Why is that? Is it because the way you're using the brakes, the way you're turning the wheel, the way you're using the throttle? Could it be that you're not looking far enough? Is it that your eyes are static and they're not moving enough, that you're not moving your head? One of the things that I always recommend to sim racers is, at some point in time, take your phone, point it at your feet, and take some video, and just get some video of your feet, and then stop and look at your footwork, and you may find that your footwork is sloppy. That there's too much of a gap between coming off the throttle and going to brake, or vice versa. You may find that you're moving your feet too much around, and they'd be better off if they're pivoting more on the floor. I have helped sim racers drive faster by putting we call a heel stop. So, if your foot is like this and it's working the pedals, let's say this is the pedal, and your foot is going like this on the pedal, it's not as good as if it's doing this on the pedal. So having something here is, in every race car, purpose-built race car, there's a heel stop. There's something here that the heel sits on, and now you're pivoting your foot here as opposed to doing this, because the big muscles in your thigh are not as they don't have as much finesse as the muscles in your calf and ankle and feet. So you want to have that. So, but if you don't look at that, you're not going to know. I also recommend taking your video on your phone or whatever, set it up behind you at some point, and watch over your shoulder how much you're turning your head, looking through the corners, how you're turning the steering wheel. Things like that will help you find those last little bits. Well, sometimes the first big chunks too. Michael asked, how important is it to not use any driver aids, traction control, automatic transmission, etc.? Balázs?
Well, I would say use what the car allows you to use, and you drive it to the maximum based on that. So I think you might be, you're probably thinking about the sort of in-game assist as well that some titles use or allowed to use. I would always recommend to get rid of that as soon as possible, because those are also not perfect, and they can lead you to learn habits that are going to be much harder to get rid of later when you want to get rid of the assist as well.
So what about ABS on a GT3 car, for instance?
But I think that's perfectly fine because the car has that built in. So that's not what the sim or the game creates for you. And the ABS, of course, it can lead you to faster or more consistent times as well, depending on how you use it. So I think that's fine to use if it's available in the car.
Yeah, and maybe trying to read between the lines here, Michael, with your question of how important is it to not use any driver aids. I don't know if you're kind of thinking, well, if I don't have any driver aids, I learn to drive without the driver aids, and then I have the driver aids, will I be better? I've heard a lot of people say that, yeah, the only way that you can develop the car control skills is to turn everything off. I'm not bought into that. So I don't think it's important to turn everything off. I mean, to what Balázs said is use what you're going to be driving. If it's got TC, use it. It's got and by the way, if you have adjustable TC, do sweeps. Try it at full TC, like lots of traction control, and then turn it down as much as you can. Learn what that does, and experiment with that as well. Ilya asked, how can I use Garage 61 to tell if I'm using all the available grip?
I think I'll pass that to Ruben.
That's a big question. Ruben, you got some thoughts?
This is so one of the ways of measuring if you're using all the available grip is looking at the GG chart, which I haven't implemented yet. So I have to say, like, #soon, because I will be adding that. But also, like, if you just look at the driving style and like we mentioned earlier, the speed race and just the cornering speed will give you a very good indication if you are maxing out the car or not. Because if another guy is faster than you, then obviously you're missing something. The why is another question, of course.
Yeah. Ilya, you always come up with good, tough questions. So here's one of the things. Obviously, if you compare your data with somebody else and they're a little bit faster than you, there's a reason. And it may be that that could be a sign that, okay, you're not using all the available grip. And if I see, if I'm looking at data, your data and somebody else's, and I'm seeing where their min speed is, and their min speed is consistently a little bit faster, I would have to ask, are you, in the middle of the corner, are you using all the grip available? And, the answer should be, I don't know. But in that asking that question, you're going to go on track and try to carry a little bit more speed and see if the car responds to it. Now, obviously, if you're driving a tighter radius, you could be at the limit, but at a lower speed. So there is that part of it as well. The other thing is, if you're comparing your data to your data, in fact, what I would do there is I'd look at least 5, pick 5 or 6 of your fastest laps, overlay them over each other, and see where there's inconsistencies. And most drivers will see that their speed through certain corners, many corners, is very much the same, almost identical. And then there might be one corner on the track where there's a lot more variance there, in which case I kind of go, okay, you haven't consistently found the limit there. So there's a couple things you can try. Renzo asked, how can I identify when I'm losing lap time due to overdriving in real life? It's fairly easy to overdrive a car in real life, where in iRacing, it's more difficult because the physics quickly let you know when you're close to the limit, i.e. tire sounds, also brake pedal feedback, and quickly let you know when you're past the limit. When you're losing time due to overdriving in real life. So Renzo, I'm just trying to get clear on, are you trying to figure out how can I identify when I'm losing lap time in sim racing or in real life? In fact, I'm going to put this over here, and Renzo, maybe you could just tell me real life or sim racing. Nick asked, for those of us driving multi-class, other than booking a coaching session with Balázs, what's the best way to practice overtaking slower classes? Take a coaching session with Balázs. To me, Racecraft is the most fun part of racing. I don't care any type of racing. The passing and being passed or discouraging passes, that is by far the most fun part to me. And that's way more fun than simply driving around by myself. So I get what you're at here. And I love multi-class racing for that reason. What's the best way to practice overtaking slower classes of cars? More of it is part of it is just do more of that kind of racing. You can do some AI racing. I find that AI drivers are often very unpredictable. Unpredictable, like the AI does some weird things, and like to the point where I'm going, would a real driver do that? But then eventually you start to actually figure out what it's doing. So I would do that. The other thing, actually, Nick, one other thing you can do is find somebody else in your community and say, hey, let's get together and do some practice sessions. And you set up passes, and you basically just you drive around the track, and you could do it in two different cars that maybe turn pretty close to the same lap times. But let's say one's a little faster on the straightaway. Maybe, if you're driving that one, you may end up having to ease off on the straightaway, let the other car go by, and then you work and come and pass it again. And you do that a bunch of times, and then you just swap and trade off. You could get, 2 or 3 people, but deliberately set up and just go, hey, let's just pass and be passed. Like, practice that. And by the way, in multi-class racing, learning how to be passed is just as important. Learning how to let another car go by you and without you losing time. I know there are drivers who, if another car is passing them, they lose a second. And then another driver, they'll lose 1/10 of a second. Which would you rather be? I would rather lose 1/10 of a second being passed than 1 second. So knowing where to let another car go by and how to minimize the amount that you get slowed down during that is really important. So I think, get into the Sim Racer Academy community and Discord and find a couple people and say, hey, can we just do a little practice session by ourselves? Just work on passing and being passed.
I'd also say that you can also analyze this time not with data, but also just looking back at the replay or the video on board that you have. And whenever you go past the car, just stop and think that could I have lost less time if I do something different? Always think about that. And if the answer is yes, then of course that's something to improve on. And when you are practicing just driving around other cars with other drivers, or just in a, let's say, random practice server on iRacing, what is a good practice there is whenever you see the next car, doesn't matter how far ahead it is, just think about it and tell yourself where and how you are going to pass this car. Because if you don't know it, let's say 5 seconds ahead before catching the car, you are already losing time by probably figuring it out just as you get there. If you have good racecraft in multiclass, when you see the car for the first time, you are most likely already know where and how you are going to pass it.
Yeah, and much of Racecraft is just doing a lot of it. Like, don't be afraid to race,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
by actually doing it, like, there's only so much theory can tell you, but the reality of sleepy drivers and well, bad drivers, learn to anticipate for those and realize that when you get in an incident, you could have probably avoided it, regardless of what the other guy did. Once you do that a lot, then you start to see patterns. So the best way to learn Racecraft is just do race.
Yeah, exactly. And you said learn to anticipate, and that's probably something. Yeah, a keyword for this probably, because yeah, there are just as you brought it up for incidents as well. It's there are typical ones that you can only learn by doing, and then you will recognize that pretty easily once you have seen it 2 or 3 times. And well, now that I think the Daytona 24 week is coming up, this is a track where some typical incidents really happen. There are some corners where it's really easy to overdo it as the prototype class, or even just as the GT class as well. There are some very, very typical incidents that happen at Daytona, and it's only like 6 corners. So
yeah, iRacing gets a critique sometimes that when you get into an incident, both drivers get a 4x regardless of who's at fault. And some people don't agree, but I sort of do actually, because in many cases, like, you can recognize like an erratic driver from a mile away and give him some space or anticipate in a way of that, but you only learn that by doing it.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm a big fan of the, for years, the sort of the general principle of passing was the overtaking driver, the one making the pass, is responsible for a clean pass. I don't agree with that. I think both drivers are responsible for a clean pass. It does nobody any good whatsoever if 2 cars have contact. I don't care who's in the right or who's in the wrong. So if everybody takes responsibility, that's better. Now I understand you're listening to this and you're going, yes, yes, yes. You may be racing against somebody who doesn't buy into that, or hasn't heard that. So just be prepared for that. Okay. Julian asked, and by the way, I'm kind of watching the clock here. We're winding down here towards the end. I'm going to say probably at this point in time, do not put any more questions in. And sorry, if you've got a very technical question around, you can always email it to Balázs at speedsecrets.com. You can contact Ruben through, Ruben, what's the best way to contact you? What's the best way?
Either Discord or like use the contact form on Garage 61, okay. Send an email, whatever. I'm available everywhere.
Right, everywhere. Go and like at 2:30 in the morning, just knock on his door because he'll be awake. Obviously.
Don't post my address.
Yeah. Okay. So Julian asked how to identify the limit of the car in a sim. The force feedback provides feedback on the front axle mostly, but not the rear axle. But the rear axle is almost guessing. And Balázs, you can jump in here, but the very first thing I'm going to say is vision makes a massive difference in terms of sensing what the car is doing, because essentially what you're trying to feel is the car doing this? Does it have yaw? Is there some rotation? And if your eyes are here, when it does this, your vision moves this much. If you're looking way off in the distance, it's a massive difference. So the further ahead you look, and the more you just notice, like you turn the wheel and you expect the car to go over here, but it's going here because you're looking here, but the car is going over here. There's a sign. If you want to go over here and you turn the wheel and now you're like this and you're still looking there, you're going, hey, the car is pointing where I don't want, or where I'm not looking, or where I'm looking. And so vision is super critical to that. And I'm going to say that's the biggest thing. And yeah, the more sensitive you get to that feel of what do you feel in the wheel. Balázs, I'm sure you've got some feedback on or thoughts on that.
Just a little bit. That also, don't think about it as front and rear axle are completely disconnected. Think about it as a way for the car balance altogether rather than just front or rear axle, because whatever the front does is going to have an effect on the rear.
Yeah. So Renzo clarified, and Renzo's question was, how can I identify when I'm losing lap time due to overdriving and it's in real life? So to me, the simple answer there, Renzo, is it doesn't matter whether it's real life or sim racing. To me, every driver should have what I call report cards. And a report card could be you come out of a corner, and shortly after that corner, there's some reference on the track. And at that moment in time, you do some kind of a check in terms of what your speed is, engine RPM. You've got something there that tells you where you're at. And then you try coming into a corner and you try carrying more speed in the corner, which sounds like you're doing pretty good at it, carrying lots of speed in the corner. And you come out of the corner and you look at that and you go, oh, my speed is down 2 miles an hour or 3K or whatever. And, so you use little report cards. And to me, practically every single corner, there's something. You go, where do I need to make my upshift as I come out of a corner? Is it a little earlier or a little bit later? And that's giving you some feedback. If you find that as you're a little more patient on the entry and you get a little of your braking done a little earlier, approaching the corner, and you come out of the corner and you find that your speed at that report card spot is a little higher, then that's pretty good feedback for you. That now, one way of getting back to power earlier is to slow even more and more and more. You could slow down to 1 mile an hour on the end of the corner. You get back to power real soon, but your speed isn't going to be as high because you're having to start from too low a speed. So, overdriving or underdriving on the entry corner can both result in less speed down that next straightaway. So if you're constantly looking at your little report card down there, it's going to tell you, okay, now I've started to overslow. I'm going to carry a little more speed, and now I'm carrying a little bit too much speed in, and that's affecting. There's a sweet spot, and now you know whether that's whether you're overdriving or underdriving. Dean asked, when coaching beginners in motorsport, what ideas do you try to teach, fix first? Personally, the very first thing I do is I try to identify and fix bad habits. And bad habits could be anywhere from, jerking on the steering wheel, the brake releases, they're popping their foot off the brake pedal, they're not looking far enough ahead. Those are the very first things that I look at, is just what are some bad habits. As I said earlier on, the trick advanced stuff that the best drivers in the world use is just they're doing the basics better. So I just look at how's the braking, how's the turn in, how's the acceleration, use of the throttle. And those are the priorities. I look at those before I start thinking about, are they driving the right line through a corner? Now, I'm going to say there is a point there early on where I start seeing how they're driving the line and how much track they're using, if they're using all the track. And I also look at if they understand why they're driving the line that they're driving. And I think we've touched on the understanding the why a few times in this session, but those are the very first things.
I would also add that what I always try to, or the point to reach, is that the driver should analyze themselves, because at the start of the session when we do coaching, first, of course, it's going to be me telling me what is wrong, but the point we want to reach to is the driver also learns to identify what is wrong and why it's wrong, and then learns to make the conclusion from that themselves.
Sorry, Brett's asking this question. In saying that, and I don't know what Brett, I'm sorry, I don't know when you put that in here. So maybe you could try to clarify when you say, in saying that, should you practice to see where the car naturally wants to be placed in a corner exit and push forward from there? Maybe you want to try to clarify that for me. Jeff asked, what practice and drills should sim racers focus on to get a high level, and how can I prevent from practicing bad habits? Balázs, you want to touch on that based on the coaching stuff? What practice and drills should a sim racer focus on to get a high level, and can I prevent from practicing bad habits?
So for practice drills, there is not a single drill that you should do. Unfortunately, it works like that. But as we touched on it before, you want to break it down always to the smallest possible drill or smallest possible area of driving that you want to practice on, and build it up from that. That's really, I think, the best way as well. Let that be braking, steering, or anything in the driving. The smallest piece you can break it down to, and you want to work from that. As for bad habits, now that's a more difficult question. Well, I would say that practice with a coach, that's always a good promotion. But there, I think it's where the data comes in, and you can use it if you have a reference of other drivers to see whether you are not doing something that is causing you to lose time or creating a bad habit.
And I will say that preventing bad habits as well as what to focus on and drills and stuff like that. Sorry, but having a coach, doing a one-on-one session with a coach will have the single biggest impact on that. And then using data. And the last is going to be, if you have the self-discipline to coach yourself with doing some of the things that we've talked about tonight, like doing video of your feet and over your shoulder and asking questions, all that kind of stuff, that will make the difference. Yurli asked, Verstappen challenged karting as the only inroad into pro racing due to cost and seems very sim bullish. In your opinions, do you agree or believe that karting isn't going anywhere? I mentioned this earlier today when we were doing a session is, hey, if I had all the money in the world and I was working with a young driver, I would have them in a kart and sim racing all the time, as well as other balanced sports like cycling and motocross, dirt bike riding, things like that. But and I'm not saying that Verstappen is the only one, but a sample size of one is not a great example. So Verstappen has done quite well using sim racing, but so is karting going anywhere? Yes. I mean, if you really want to get to Formula One, you should be in a kart and sim racing. Period. Tori asked, when it comes to not practicing bad habits, what are the most common bad habits people tend to reinforce? Most of us with bad habits don't necessarily know they are bad habits. I'll mention something I mentioned earlier today, and the number one thing that I see is trying to go fast in the wrong places. And driving is all about compromises. You give up a little speed here to gain more speed over there. You give up a little speed here to gain a little bit here. And you're always trying to find out where the right balance of those compromises are. And I'm going to say the most common bad habit that I see is drivers trying to be fast everywhere, and you can't do that. So that's my first thing. Balázs, you talked about this earlier today, so
yeah. Well, I was going to say the same thing first,
okay,
and
sorry.
I will also add being smooth with your driving is one of the things that I see that always needs working on. And that comes from what you said as well, trying to be fast in the wrong places or trying to be fast everywhere, and that leads to not smooth driving in the end. Here's
a good one for both of you guys. So Nick asked, question for Ruben and also Balázs. I feel like I have good separation between throttle and brake, but my telemetry often says otherwise. Is the trace data iRacing outputs live exactly what the pedal's position is in the physical world, or are there other factors that govern what I see in RaceLab and Garage 61?
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this one. There's actually for the inputs pedals, there's actually two signals in iRacing Live, like the brake trace and the brake rod trace, for instance. And the same with the throttle. And one of the differences, for instance, could be that if you look at a throttle trace, and for instance, the one you see on Garage 61, like not the live one, is the throttle trace. It includes like the blips of the engine when you do a downshift, whereas that's obviously not happening in your pedal. So there are subtle differences, but they should generally correlate to what you are pushing. And in the end, if you're comparing data, even if there's like a factor in it, like if there's a slope applied, as long as the slope is the same for both persons, then it doesn't matter in comparison. But
I would also
Balázs probably knows more about this, as he's a
I
real
would add
simulator driver.
something about the calibration as well, because if the calibration is wrong somewhere, then what you see in iRacing or Garage 61 is not going to match the physical world, because maybe you have a dead zone, or maybe you have something that is causing you that feel that you have good separation, but in reality you don't. Sometimes people have a too sensitive brake pedal or no dead zone in the brake pedal, and then rest their foot on it, and they are surprised that they are braking the straight.
Yeah, especially if you use like a non-linear curve, then it's like danger zone.
Okay, Luke asked, we're down to 3 questions and then we're going to wrap up. So thanks everybody so far. Luke asked, any advice on driving front-wheel drive cars in iRacing? I can't seem to make the car turn, even with the brake bias turned down to around 60%. The very first thing I'm just going to throw it here, and then you guys can talk to the specifics of this, is as a general rule in terms of front-wheel drive, think about what the front tires are doing. As you approach a corner, you're braking, obviously. You brake. You go to turn in, and you're asking the tires to turn and brake at the same time. You're asking a lot of those front tires, and especially in a front-wheel drive car, because you've got all that weight up front. It's kind of like the opposite of a Porsche 911 with the weight hanging way out the back. That's like a big pendulum. In this case, the pendulum says, let's go straight. So front-wheel drive cars tend to want to understeer that way. So one of the things you've got to be really sensitive to is releasing the brake pedal enough to give the front tires enough grip to be able to change direction and get the car to turn. So just as a driving technique thing, one of the very first things I'd suggest that you look at doing is think about releasing the brake pedal a little sooner as you're turning into the corner. I'm not saying your end of braking point where you're finished trail braking may be the same, but you've actually started a little earlier and you just have lighter pressure in that last part of the braking. Think about that the next time. Balázs, do you want
to? Just that, I think front wheel drives, the key word there is usually patience. Because the rear wheel drive, of course, you can use that to rotate the car a little bit towards the exit as well. But as Ross said, it tends to understeer, well, in almost every stage of the corner, usually, or it wants to go that way. So being patient with the car usually goes a long way, because in that sense, this is more punishing to overdriving than the rear wheel drive almost.
Luke, I'd start off by brake a car length earlier, begin braking a car length earlier, and come into the corner and see that by the time you get down to that turning point, you're starting to come off the pedal, and see how the car responds then. If the car turns in a little better then, now you know, okay, maybe you've been rushing the entry a little bit too much. Gage, is it? I'm struggling to bring my sports car rating up to where my Formula car rating is. Are there some major things I should adjust between the two race types? Balázs?
Well, I can say that it depends, as we usually do, because the sports car, they do have a lot of different cars in there. So it depends a lot if you are driving a GT3 car. Yeah, those are a lot different than open wheel cars. If you're driving the prototypes, maybe that's not so different. So I would say that, if you are coming from Formula cars, try to find that what is the most similar for that to make it easier for yourself to get adapted to that type of driving.
Okay, last question from Greg. The Daytona 24-hour and multi-class racing or any major endurance events. There are drivers who are not prepared to wait for an overtake, and you have another car in your class behind you that isn't keen to wait. What is the best method to approach this situation? I can give you a solid it depends. And I'll just ramble for a second here while Balázs is thinking about his answer as well. Greg, to me, the most important thing is that you sound like you've identified, you have the awareness and the ability to identify that driver is impatient, that driver is more patient. That is like 99% of the question or the answer here is you reading other drivers and understanding what you think they're going to do and starting to get better at predicting them. And yeah, I mean, if you've got a driver that's, going to get stupid and dive bomb, and especially in a 24-hour race, is let him go. Let him go. I'm going to say, from having done a lot of endurance racing in my life, the patience it takes at various parts of the race is almost as hard as that last sprint at the very end, which a lot of endurance races happen to be, is they get down to, you're racing for position with a little bit at the end, and it's flat out sprint race at that point. The patience leading up to that is as hard or harder. So that's my very first thing, I think, is practicing turning your brain on from going from patience mode to all out, flat out. One of the things that I work with a lot of drivers on is I call it R1, R2, and R3 mode. So R1 mode is crank it up flat out, like that's almost qualifying laps, every lap. R2 is just backed off just a tiny little bit. It's still fast, and I'm not saying it's like a second slower. It could be like a tenth or two slower, but it's just that tiny little bit more conservative, more consistently safer, less chance of taking big risks. And then R3 is more of a save the car, save the everything mode. And the more you can kind of in your mind program yourself to go, I'm in R1 mode, I'm in R2 mode, I'm in R3 mode, and know that, there's a point in a 24-hour race where you're probably going to spend a lot of time at R2. And in R2, if you've got somebody who's obviously impatient behind you, it may be better off just to go ahead, I'll follow, and wait for you to make a mistake. Balázs, you've done a lot of endurance
ends up in the wall.
Sorry, Ruben. Sorry, I talked over you.
Loose cannon usually ends up in the wall anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that what we talked about before with driving in the traffic in the endurance racing is just learning to anticipate the situations. And for that, Daytona 24 is a great example. I would say that especially the bus stop, because that's what creates the biggest traffic jam every time. And you will see that the smarter prototypes, when they see that they cannot overtake before the bus stop, they will be lifting halfway down the straight before the bus stop. For example, I've had the race yesterday, more than yesterday now, with the IMSA Esports Series, and it was the same there. I saw that cars were just the distance in front that I know I'm not going to catch before the bus stop. And I was coasting half the straight, and what's the most important is you saw that the smarter prototypes, they are not going to push up to the behind of the car right in the middle of the bus stop, because they are compromising themselves on the exit. So, you know, in that situation you describe as well, if you have a driver behind you that's not prepared to wait like that, just let them do what they want. You know, if they make the move on you, they are going to be stuck, just as you said, with the slower class. So, you know, in that situation, for example, in the bus stop, you would get an easy overtake on the exit. So I would say, again, patience and learn to read and anticipate the situation.
That's the most fun. That kind of racecraft kind of stuff. That is the most fun. So, hey, thank you for being on here. Thank you for your questions and this community. Ruben, thanks for bringing all this together and getting your community involved with our community, Garage 61, Sim Racer Academy. If you have more questions, please reach out to us. We have all sorts of resources. The library and Sim Racer Academy's got all sorts of practice drills, many of the ones that we've talked about here in this Chalk Talk. On my other speedsecrets.com site, you know, I have a master class on driving in the rain coming up, and playbook videos, training thing, virtual track walks for different tracks only in the US at the moment. And just released today, we have some Sim Racer t-shirts in the Speed Secrets store now. So starting to get some Sim Racer t-shirts out there. So anyways, Ruben, any last words?
Just want to thank everybody for being part of like the Garage 61 adventure. It started as like 3 friends doing some stuff, and now it's a bit more than that. So you guys make the community.
Yeah, that's awesome. Balázs?
Yeah, just wanted to thank everyone for being here, for the great questions, and Ruben for setting this up, and you for hosting, Ross. Yeah, I think it's been really fun.
Thanks for all the answers.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks everybody. The 3 of us, we love doing this, and it would get really boring if just the 3 of us were talking to each other. So thanks for being on the Chalk Talk so we could talk to you. With that, keep learning, keep having fun. Thank you.